there are certain human abilities that have a window of opportunity to develop.
You went to meet this coach of yours who helped you to find your path as an expert in parenting, so that you help people in parenting, because already you are good at parenting. That is for sure. That is why you picked that, right?
Parents have been told and programmed to believe that their job as the parent is to control their child. My name is Helen V. Hicks. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have been in the mental health field for almost 30 years. I've owned and operated my own private practice for mental health counseling for the last 15 years. I'm also the mother of 5. I co-host my own
Congratulations.
podcast. Thank you. I'm an author. I wrote a parenting book called The Parenting Treatment Plan, and I also have my online course for parenting that's called Smart Goals Parenting. So I have a lot going on, and a lot of it is in regards to mental health. And I forgot, I also teach classes on Udemy in regards to mental health, wellness in the workplace.
Wow, that's good. That's good. So you are sort of all rounder. No, is that you got experience. No, these are wealth of experience, so they are all important for us. So we're going to be touching in one piece at a time.
Sure.
So, all right, Helen, why don't you tell me a bit about your background in terms of how we do is that we go back to the basis. Where were you born, and what do you remember of your infancy? That is where we start from usually.
I was born in California in the US, and so I recall nothing of infancy. I think the first memory that I can really attach to, I was probably like 3 or 4 years old, and we were living in North Carolina because my dad was in the Army. And so every couple of years we moved around. So while I was born in California, we had moved to North Carolina by the time I was like 3 or 4. And I remember being in my big red coat because it was cold, it was wintertime, and I was outside playing with the next door neighbor. So like that's the earliest memory that I can identify.
And that is lovely. That is not small. That is not small at all. You know why that is important? Because since you are talking about parenting, you are talking about. I want to believe that there is a lot of conversation you do, a lot of children, talking about children, how to stay with children, how to raise children. So now you're talking about how you were growing up and all of that. That makes sense at the end of the day, at least from the way I see it, no?
Full circle, right?
Yeah. It turn around. It goes around and it turn around.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. So you were born in California, and that is where you grew up. That is where you made your first experiences, right?
Correct.
All right. So in your young adolescent, as you are moving around, what do you see around yourself? Okay, I'm trying to see what you were seeing in your younger years.
Okay. So after North Carolina, we moved to Hawaii and we stayed there for almost 3 years. So I have a lot of memories of growing up in Hawaii on the main island, Oahu. And well, I guess Hawaii is technically the main island. So Oahu is probably the most popular island. But we were right in Honolulu. And I definitely recall like the block that we lived on. If you went to the end of the block, you could look down the mountain and you could see Waikiki Beach, which is like one of the most popular beaches in Hawaii. So that's a very vivid memory that I have. And also with my dad being in the Army. So sometimes he would take us down to the beach and he would put one of us on his back and we'd have to hold on around his neck. And he would swim out to the buoy in the ocean and come back. And that would be like his workout.
That's fun.
So definitely, it was fun and it was scary because like the first time I did it with him, like you're in the ocean. This isn't a pool, so
What if you
other
fall
things are
off?
brushing up.
What if you fall off? What happens?
I mean, I didn't want to find out, but I'm sure my dad would have got me.
All right, that's interesting. That's interesting.
My future professional goals are I want to reach 1% of the world's parents, which is definitely a large number, and teach them how to parent healthier and easier. Because in the world of parenting, I honestly believe a lot of people have been bamboozled. People have been told that, this is the way parenting is and it has to be hard and your kids have to be a certain way. And these are things that you should expect and accept as just part of your parenting journey. And I'm kind of coming from a place of that's not true. That wasn't my experience between myself and my father. And it hasn't been my experience between myself and my sons because I just kind of started off mimicking my father. So I had my first son when I was 19. So I really didn't understand. I couldn't put into technical terms or psychological terms or anything of that nature, like what my father did. So all I could do was mimic him. And in mimicking my father repeatedly, then I was, as I got older and, I got more seasoned in the world of psychology and behavioral health, then I was able to put all these terms into place so that I can teach other people how to do the same thing. And so people can have that joyful experience of parenting pretty much all the time. I mean, yes, there's always going to be some type of setback because, personalities may clash and what you want doesn't always match what your kids want. So yes, there can be some pushback, but it really shouldn't be like these massive blowups and explosions and all this unhealthiness and dysfunction.
Do you often hear people complain of that or head-end and dysfunction? Of course, maybe we might have time to go about that later. But anyway, since you made mention of that, maybe you could say something about that.
I mean, it's within my work, but also there's some experience of it personally, because although I had this great and wonderful relationship with my father, the relationship with my mother was like the complete opposite and like full of dysfunction. So in that respect, my mother never really talked a lot about her childhood and what she was exposed to, but there was always the air of a lot of dysfunction. So from what I learned as I got older is that her father was an alcoholic and that he beat on everyone, and that he was a very dominant type of man, and he kind of wanted everybody to respect him even though his behavior wasn't respectful. And so there's a lot of dysfunction in terms of abuse, neglect, mistreatment, emotional abuse, being called names, being put down, things of that nature that happened in her house. So I can understand, well, she wasn't given certain tools to be able to bring that into her own parenting experience of myself and my siblings. But at the same time, my mother also had mental health issues that she never sought treatment for. And I don't know the reasons as to why she was against any type of mental health treatment, but she didn't seek it out. And so over time, it just got worse and worse. So you add mental health or mental illness into all the dysfunction that she grew up with in terms of abuse and neglect, and just feeling unimportant, basically. And so pulling that all together, and then her being a mother of 5 children herself, then it's kind of like, this is not a really good recipe. So, but I know there's other people out there who have similar situations, whether there's abuse and neglect going on in the home, there's a matter of their primary needs like food, clothing, and shelter not being met or not consistently being met. People who have their own mental illness, that is going untreated. And so they're projecting all their problems and issues onto their children and other people in their family. So, like, these are some of the examples of dysfunction that I know people have experienced, and I've helped people to resolve as best as possible.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, we'll have time to come and revisit this part again. Actually, the question I was asking you before this one was, or maybe I needed to ask it better. Was
I'm sorry.
no, it's perfectly fine. Was as you were much younger, much smaller, what were you projecting yourself into the future? Because you had never been an adult before, you are a child, but you certainly are seeing something in the future.
Interesting enough, the earliest idea that I had of a career in my childhood was of being a florist, which is really kind of off. It doesn't match up in any way or shape or form, but I've always loved flowers. I mean, just the beautiful colors, the wonderful scents of them. Like, I always loved flowers. And, growing up as a kid, people tell you, oh, well, do what makes you happy. Well, it makes me happy to be around flowers.
Why not? It's beautiful, though. It's lovely.
Absolutely. So, of course, that changed a lot over the years, but definitely the first thing that I can recall thinking of.
That's lovely. Was there any reason that you were so attracted to? Okay, a woman should be attracted to flower. There is nothing strange about that at all. But kind of curiosity, was there anything that particularly make you feel so attracted to flower or something like that?
I honestly can't identify any specific memories. I do recall, the time that I spent growing up in Hawaii. And of course, Hawaii has, beautiful tropical plants, all over the place. And I remember it looked so pretty. So that's probably the only thing I can really identify.
All right, that's good. That's good. That's good. Now, how did you get into mental health and also parenting? Okay, parenting, most importantly, how did you get into it? What led you to that? Okay, you are a parent too. This might be no brainer, but it's important for me.
Okay. Well, I'll start with how I got into mental health, and then I'll transition into how I got into parenting more specifically. So, when I first started off going to college, I thought maybe I wanted to be a lawyer because people always told me that I could argue. I could argue a point to the death. So I thought, perhaps, yeah, okay, lawyers argue, so maybe that's my calling. So that was very short-lived because I flunked. I mean, absolute flunked two important classes moving in that direction. So I definitely had to rethink. And so, and just kind of exploring different classes, trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go in from there, I took an intro to psychology class. And we came across abnormal psych, and we were going through some of the diagnoses in abnormal psych. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my mom. So because up until then, like, my mom was undiagnosed, she was untreated. We just knew she had these crazy behaviors, that would go on. And so I went home and I showed my dad the book, and I was like, Dad, read this, read this, read this. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's your mom.
Somebody have take a picture of her.
Right. And so psychology to me became like this huge window that now made sense of the world I had been living up until that point. And many aspects of my world that hadn't made sense, psychology all of a sudden clarified, why all of this made sense. And it really kind of felt like a relief. Like, oh my gosh, like, it's not me. There's something with her. I didn't do this. I can't fix it, and it really just felt like a weight was released. And so from that moment on, I was in love with psychology. So that really kind of launched me into, my next 30 years of life, pretty much, of being, based in the field of psychology. So transitioning over into parenting. So a few years ago, I got divorced. And so I was really looking to make a shift career wise as well. But I really wasn't sure what I wanted to shift to. I didn't want to go too far away from the field of psychology, but I didn't really have clarity on what else I wanted to do within the field or that was related. And so I happened to be talking to a coach, and it was kind of interesting because we were just doing like I guess like an interview to see if we wanted to work together with, him coaching me in regards to things. And he asked me in the interview, he was just like, well, what do you feel like you do well? And it was like instant. I was like, I'm a great parent.
Lovely.
And so like that was just like an instant click for me. And then I just started going with it from there. And then the idea of, my book and, SMART goals parenting, all of that just came to me, and I had this clarity within about 30 days of speaking to this guy. And I'm sure, he was very proud that he was able to help me in just like 20 minutes, but he probably didn't like the fact that he didn't make any money off of it. But either way, that's really what kind of set me into the path of parenting. And then as I've built up, what resources that I do have for parents and the information, the course, the book, I interviewed other parents to really kind of tap into what their struggles are, what they're looking for help with. And it solidified and validated, the information that I was pulling together. And for me to be able to say, yes, there is a need for this. Yes, this can be easier. But the problem has always been that the information presented about parenting has been confusing. Like there's so many people out there who are writing information about parenting, and a lot of them, what I have discovered, they're saying, oh, this worked for me, so it must work for everyone else. And it's not really a scientific approach. It's not really a generalizable approach. It's just like, okay, I'm happy that worked for you, but it's not taking into account that so many people have so many different dynamics and situations that they're working with. So I really kind of shaped my approach to parenting to be very basic and very generalizable, with people being able to get the same results.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we'll spend some time again on the parenting just now, but I want to spend a few seconds on the psychology, because I think that also is helping you in your parenting work or your parenting career, as it were. No? So, but first, which aspect of psychology was mostly interesting to you, and which aspect of psychology did you spend more time on? Because I can see that you've been working in that field for a lot of time. Could you say something about that?
Okay, so mostly behavioral. So of course, people know there's lots of different aspects and introspections into psychology, the world of psychology, the world of the mind, and how the mind works and how people work. And so a lot of my focus has been on the behavioral aspect, which means that people have certain beliefs, attitudes, thought patterns, and those thought patterns, attitudes, and beliefs then influence the behavior that people, I'm sorry, lost my word, that people, exhibit, to others, and how they interact with other people. So that's where I've really kind of focused the majority of my career, and, just work with people, because I started off working in group homes, and in those types of facilities you get a lot of behavior. It's kids who are acting out, who they have whatever type of history that they've experienced, and a lot of times it was abuse and neglect that were involved, but it led to them developing specific patterns of behavior, and just learning what these patterns of behavior tend to indicate as far as someone's attitudes and beliefs about themselves and the world around them. And over time, with being exposed to patterns of behavior over and over and over again, and I absolutely do label myself as a expert behaviorist, because I can have people show up to a session and say, hey, this, and this has been going on. And I can add to that and say, yeah, and this, and this too, right? And they're like, oh, how did you know? Because, human behavior tends to follow certain patterns. And if you get familiar enough with those patterns, then you get insight into what are most likely the attached thought patterns and belief patterns, that are underlying it and supporting it. And then you help people to shift and change it.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, as if maybe I knew that. Yeah, we could maybe do with two more questions on that. Why it is important for us, because most people that are listening to this podcast, they are in business. They want to understand how to better serve their audience. And one of the argument that comes out quite often is about the behavior of the people, because you need to know how to better engage with the people. And psychology is very effective here, and behavioral psychology is very important in this area. So since we have an expert in that field, you could help us to maybe dip a little deeper in that. So when people talk about behavioral psychology, what really are they intending, or really what is the meaning of behavioral psychology?
So first off, I'm looking for patterns. Patterns are the most telling, because if a person engages in specific patterns, that means whatever is driving them to consistently engage in this thing over and over and over again, it has to be attached to a deeply rooted perception of themselves, perception of the world around them, their attitudes, beliefs, all of those types of things. And if they have those attitudes and beliefs and those things, then something has happened in their living experience that has shown them and reiterated to them, well, this is how the world is, and this is how you have to be in order to survive in this type of world. So that's what I'm mainly looking for. I'm looking for the patterns. So when I'm engaged with clients, and I encourage my clients to tell me whatever stories that they want to tell me. If they want to talk about what happened this week, sure, we can talk about what happened this week. If they want to tell me something that happened 5 years ago, sure, we can talk about that. Why? Because I'm looking for patterns. So if I start to see, 10 years ago, this thing happened, and then 5 years ago, a very similar thing happened, and then 3 years ago, the same thing happened. I'm looking for this pattern. And then once I establish there's a pattern, I can bring awareness to it and say, hey, have you ever realized that when A happens, engage in B, and then we have C to deal with afterwards? Just helping people to come into that awareness of what they're doing to contribute to their own unhappiness with life. And then once they have that awareness, then you can work on changing it. And so just like the attitudes and beliefs influence behavior, behavior does the same thing. If a person can change their behavior, if they can change their patterns of how they interact with the world around them, then they can change and influence those attitudes and beliefs that are initially, supporting them. So that's the synopsis of it.
Thank you so much for that, Helen. I appreciate that. That is really very important. Now, I have a signature program, which of course is about storytelling. We actually help people to own their story, because we believe that storytelling is actually the most important instrument that we have as human beings. Of course, I'm coming to ask you maybe a few questions on that just now, since you are dealing on psychology, behavioral psychology. I want to believe that you are using storytelling there. So it is 3 steps to own your story and leverage it. We start with, we call it NBA storytelling strategy, in that the N start for now, the B start for before, and the A start for after, which is usually, it's not a chronological order. instead of before, now, after we start, because you need to be before you can think of what has happened before. So we look at what is around you, what do you see around you, what do you think constitute what you are today. Then from there we move into, but if you are where you are today, something lead to that. So therefore, what have been before you, which is the before. Then if we understand the before, you understand where you are now, then you need to project where you want to be in the future so that you are basically writing your own story in this sense. Then, of course, there are other things that we need to do in that area. Of course, why I'm bringing this part out is that storytelling is very important for us here because you need to talk for you to be able to help people understand you. Because now, imagine you are going to the doctor. You want the doctor to treat you. If you reach there and you just close your mouth, you are going to die because the doctor don't know what they want to treat you of. And until you say something, they don't know where to enter. Because I look at story as a window for people to enter into you. And I believe that you guys, I mean, the psychologists, you deal a lot with story. So help me. What role does storytelling do in you being able to understand this pattern that you are referring to?
Okay. So I think storytelling is huge in terms of being able to understand the pattern, because I'm looking at it from the sense of you tell the story in terms of your perception of what has happened. And, everybody will say, there's always like three sides of a story. And, in some ways or respects, maybe there's more sides to that story. But people tell their perception, they tell what they've experienced, whether that is 100% reflective of what actually happened, but it's their truth because it's how they experienced whatever happened. And so I think storytelling becomes like a window into who that person sees themselves as and how they see their role within the world around them. I think it's very eye-opening, and it's very, I don't know what my word is. It's very intimate because it tells you who this person is to their core, to their sense of, beliefs. So I think storytelling, as you're presenting it, is very much a very intimate type of connection that, a person is being vulnerable and sharing pieces of themselves, even if they don't realize, how vulnerable they're allowing themselves to be. But it is an intimate connection to tell a story.
All right, that's interesting. Um, I'm curious. I'm curious, Helen. Now, uh, how do you start? Because your role as a psychologist is very important for me in that whether we are talking about oral narration, which is very rich in African tradition, or the written story, as it were. Now, I am imagining the psychology in African typical setting, traditional setting in this case now. Because see, many people don't look at it as a psychologist, but they are psychologists, no? I mean, those when you have a dream, for example, you go to meet somebody. You don't usually go to meet everybody. There are some people who are trained in this field. You go to tell them, "Oh, I've had this dream. I am scared. I am afraid." Now, this person will usually engage in story with you, like asking you a series of questions. Or maybe you are afraid of something. You don't even know what you are afraid of sometimes. So you go meet these diviner, for example, who will then investigate you. They will engage in series of things after they have heard you, know. So whether you call them spiritualists or whatever, but these are usually the people who sort of play with you, play with your mind, because you allow them to play with your mind. That you tell them your story. You are the one that go to meet them because you have a problem. And for them to know the problem that you are having, you need to allow them into your mind by telling your story so that they ask you a series of other questions. So my question there really is, how do you enter into their world using their story, or maybe let it there guiding you? I am seeing the infinite potential of storytelling in this sense now.
No, I think I got where you're coming from. So I think it's interesting because it's part of what you already shared, like you have the now and this, getting to know the before and then, going to the after. So there is definitely a pattern within that is like something has happened now. So the person is coming to you because there's the now that's going on, that's bothering them, that's causing them stress, or whatever that emotional reaction may be. So you have some awareness of the now, but now you have to investigate the before. So you want to ask the person questions in terms of like, well, what happened before this? What was going on? What was like for you? Can you describe that to me? Who was involved with your life? Who was missing from your life? And I think the way people ask questions, by, like I just said, who is involved versus who is missing. Because when you say words like missing, then it causes people to think, is there someone missing? Do I miss someone from my life? Is there somebody that I wish was here that's no longer here? Like, so the words that you use, even to investigate, they kind of like prompt people to go in a specific direction. So it's, someone having a sense of clarity of what you want to know and being able to utilize your words in a way that shape the direction that people go in. You can definitely use your words and what we call like motivational interviewing to help people give you information rather than you beating information out of them, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, of course, we have a lot of stories, though, of maybe police or even sometimes the state authorizing that kind of treatment because they are afraid, so they want to get information, and sometimes the information they get are also very are corrupt. They're not actually good information. Anyway, there are other ways to do that. Okay, I'm not going beyond that. So, another question I would like to ask you there before we move into parenting just now is, as a psychologist, as a behavioral psychologist, are there instruments that you need to use to be able to, okay, I want to say again, get into the mind of the people because that is what you do. Okay, we might look for another better way to say it, but that is essentially what is happening because talking about behavior, you are going to alter something there. Whether you are entering there physically or you are entering there with information, whatever, but you are altering something in the behavior. So, do you need to use instrument? If any, what instrument do you use?
Honestly, for me and the way I engage with my clients, I would say I'm the instrument because I am an avid believer and definitely a sharer of the truth is an experience. It's not in what people say and do, it's in how you feel when they say and do it. So I really rely on myself in that respect. So when someone tells me something, I'm tuning in with myself as to whether that feels true. And I'll reflect back to clients and be like, there's something about that feels a little off, or if somebody says something and like, ooh, I can feel the power of that statement. Like, yes, this is a very resounding truth for this person. So that's where I go with it. It's not necessarily a physical instrument that I'm, sharing with someone or anything like that. I'm really tuning into what's my experience of being in the same space and sharing the story or, sharing whatever exchange with this person. What's my experience of them? And I can always utilize that to present it back to them and to be able to say, I'm hearing you speak. And at the same time, this is what is happening for me. And it causes me to wonder if this is how other people feel in your presence at the same time. And if they do, maybe that's the reason why people interact with you the way that they do. So that's my shortest answer possible.
But that is great. That is great. Because the instrument don't always have to be physical, no. Sometimes um they can also be invisible, no. So yeah, we get you perfectly. That is good. That is where you undergo the training as an expert on knowing how to work with people. So that is perfectly fine. Yeah. So now let's look at it again. You went to meet this coach of yours who helped you to find your path as an expert in parenting, so that you help people in parenting, because already you are good at parenting. That is for sure. That is why you picked that, right?
Right. I mean, that was my perception, but also the perception of my sons and, just other people
That
around
that
me
is
because
not
I would
better. That
have,
is not better validation than that if you are getting it from your son.
if I'm the only one who thinks so, that's a bad.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting. Okay. Now, which are the people that are coming to you for help?
So definitely a lot of my clients. So, I have my counseling practice. So there's a lot of my clients are parents, and me being able to help guide them through specific situations with their children. And they'll come back or they'll tell somebody else, or they'll say, oh, hey, I was talking to my girlfriend and I was trying to, tell her what you told me and I couldn't remember, could you remind me of the thing that you said? So it's just like more and more people would do that. And then people that I would interact with, at my son's schools, other parents, and just sharing little tidbits with them here and there. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, like that works so well. And how'd you know? And how'd you come up with it? So just a lot of interactions and feedback from people that really let me know people need this. And one of my sons, my second oldest son, it's a thing between the two of us. Like he'll have an encounter out in, public somewhere, and he'll see something and he'll call me or text me. He's like, Mom, they need your help.
That is your assistance.
Right.
You better employ me. So next time when you do the work, you say, Bobby, you are going to give me my own cut in the share, no? I'm joking. Of
He
course.
probably would, though. He would. He would like, just call my mom. Just call my mom.
But anyway, that is good. That is good. Of course, now it means that your son know what you are doing perfectly well, so they know how to help you also in that area, which is a good thing. That is a good thing.
Right.
All right. So now let's look at it this way. What kind of challenges do people usually have that they look for you?
Okay. So most of the challenges stem from a very core issue, which is parents have been told and programmed to believe that their job as the parent is to control their child. And parents trying to, I guess, exert that level of control often becomes the battleground, of problems between them and their child. And I come in and I say, nope, your job isn't to control. I understand why parents believe their job is to control, because human babies are born very dependent. And without someone caring for them, they absolutely will die. They're not like other animals that can be born and just go off on their own and do their own thing. So from the time human babies are born, you have doctors and nurses and, other professionals and, school teachers and everybody in the public who sees you, who are telling you what you should do and what you have to do for this child. And if something is going wrong with your child, then people are telling you that you did something wrong. You didn't do it right. You're the one to blame, that either your child behaves this way, your child weighs too much, your child doesn't weigh enough, your child, whatever is going on with your child, parents are often blamed. And so parents receive this message that my job is to control. And if I'm not controlling what's happening with my child, then I'm failing. And so that is completely untrue. I mean, I understand the responsibility of having to protect and provide for your child. Absolutely understand that. But it's not your job to control your child. So that's the first place that I start, was pulling people out of that mindset that their job is to control. And once they do, a lot of issues begin to fall away, because you've eliminated this power struggle because the parent is trying to control the child is trying to control their own world. And like there's this constant back and forth and battle for who gets to be in control. But once you let it go, and that's where you come back to, one of my parenting goals, which is, kids need to learn how to make good choices. And you come back to you're providing choice rather than control, then things ease up. Children feel more comfortable. They feel like you have a sense of belief in them and their abilities, and they tend to rise up to that.
That's very interesting. That is really very interesting. All right, I've had this curiosity for a very long time. I don't know if this is the right time for it, but this is how I'm going to put it. Now, imagine if human babies are born, they are just left in the natural world to live with other animals. Of course, not with the lions, no.
Tasty snack.
Okay, to live in a world, okay, not 100% controlled, but at least controlled to the extent that we know that, okay, this animal are not just going to eat up these children. What is going to happen?
I think that's where we have the story of Tarzan that comes into play, where because human babies aren't born knowing that they're human, they learn that by their environment and what they're exposed to. So if a human baby was essentially raised by monkeys or apes, then that baby would most likely take on the same characteristics. And we can see less intensive examples of that. So years ago, when there weren't as many restrictions on the world of psychology and the experiments that they could do, they wanted to know if they could teach children to be afraid of something, even if they've never been exposed to it. Even if that something has never hurt them, or caused them any type of stress or anguish. And they could, if they could get a mother to react to a certain stimuli, then the baby would automatically adopt that same reaction without ever having a negative experience. So from that experiment, we can see that behavior is learned through exposure and observation. And so if a human baby was, again, placed with monkeys or apes, then that baby would act like a monkey. It would do the things that, it's surrounded by.
All right. That is an important question. That looked like a rabbit hole. I wanted to trade that a little bit because I think it is interesting. Now, if that were to happen, that is a hypothetical situation, no? How much percentage of the human being is it going to be left with the baby? Because he have now lived in the natural world, not fully controlled by human being. Human being, the sense of the human law, the democracy, the education, the philosophy. How much of it is the child going to have? Or is going to be evident in the behavior of this child who will then become an adult in the world?
That is a huge question because also what research has learned is there are certain human abilities that have a window of opportunity to develop. So such as language. There's a window of opportunity for humans to develop language. And if it's not developed within that specific window, it becomes extremely difficult to develop outside of that window. So it's hard to answer that question, but it's definitely apparent that if a human was then raised by some other animal and had only been exposed to that animal's environment and therefore missed the window of opportunity to develop in certain ways, that person may never, fully develop into 100% humanness, just because that's just kind of what we've learned from the studies that have been conducted, and not to say that they've been extensive. There are limits to what we can actually do. but but so far that's what we have learned. Like there's windows of opportunity.
Now, that is this thing that I say quite often here. Of course, talking about the power of storytelling again, that we actually behave according to the information that we are exposed to. I see you confirming that too. And I usually will give an example of the ego and the chicken. That if you take the egg of an eagle and you mix it with that of the chicken, and it's hatched by the chicken and it's raised by the chicken, that the ego will behave like the chicken because they will behave according to the environment where they find themselves, even though the ego was supposed to be flying in the air. So this is an example I usually give. I am not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just saying that based on my human instinct, based on my flow understanding. So as a psychologist, what do you say to that?
I mean, there's not much I can say that it's true. And it's not limited just to people. I think it's limited to every creature out there, that no creature on this earth is truly born knowing what exactly it is and can be influenced to behave differently or not in accordance to what we consider nature's path, if exposed to different environmental conditions.
Okay, in that case, what is the role of epigenetics that have become very popular in the conversation today? That maybe when the parent have suffered something, whether good or bad, that the children can suffer it even though they have never been exposed to the same situation. How do we explain that in this context?
Okay. It's really interesting because recently I picked up two books that are on this topic, and I haven't fully gotten through them, but I've garnered enough information to speak. Basically, what these books are saying is, like, out of all the different genetic material that human beings have, very little of it is pre-coded. Very little of that genetic material is distinct in saying, okay, this is what you're going to be. The majority of it is made up of certain types of cells that can shift and change and adapt over time, again, depending on environmental conditions. And so I don't know, this popped into my head, so I have to share it. I know recently I've read a couple of people who've been posting in regards to race. It has no genetic markers, and that's true. Like, as much as people don't want to hear that, and people have, stood on their heel and died on their heel, that, oh, different races are it's superior or inferior or whatever direction they want to go in. There's no genetic proof of this. Genetic wise, there is no difference, that makes a person Black or white, Hispanic or Asian or any of that. And that's because these are things that get shaped according to environmental factors. And so, I'm sorry, I probably got off track, but
It's okay. We're just sharing.
so I believe that if epigeneticists keep going in the direction that they're going in, they're going to come to these conclusions that specific authors have already, arrived at, and then they can make it more widely known that we generally do have more in common than we have not in common, because the majority of us is unwritten. And it is our environment that truly causes that to happen. So when you talk about, like, the generational pass down of things, so one generation here experienced certain environmental factors that imprinted on their genes, and the genes that they then passed down to the next generation. And then most likely they engaged in behavior that recreated the same environmental factors that reinforce that genetic imprinting on the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So that's when we get into talking about generational curses, where, people have just been reiterating the same pattern over and over and over again, because again, you're exposed to this environment and this becomes your vision of, oh, this is what the world is like. This is how I'm supposed to be. This is how parents are. This is how brothers or sisters are. People accept that as their truth. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. So when they get older and they have families of their own, they wind up recreating all of those dynamics. They say, oh, well, when I was a child, this was the role that my father played. So now that I'm a father, this is the role that I have to play. And if people aren't exposed to healthier options, healthier behaviors, healthier patterns, then they will continue to recreate and reiterate and imprint on the genes all these different patterns of behavior.
Hmm. That is interesting. That is really interesting. Okay, let me see if I get this part correct. You can correct me on it. That now we have a footprint that we are never going to cut, which is that since the beginning of time, we have never cut in the connection, no? Okay, whether you call it spirituality, but this is not really spirituality. This is just pure science. In that for you to exist, you need to come as a progenitor. You need to come as a product, literally coming out of something or somebody in this case. In that a man and a woman literally need to physically meet and fuse for the child to be born. Therefore, there is this connection. You cannot be born in a prosim. I cannot just imagine you as a child and you become a child. Therefore, there is this inheritance of that thing, of where you are coming from, which is that this is the father, this is the mother, both of them have fused together, you are the product. Therefore, you have inherited something from them. But what you do with that is also conditioned by where you live now, your environment, which is to say, if you don't change the environment, the odds are very high that you are going to perpetuate the same circumstances or the same characteristics of the parent wherever they might be living. Which is therefore to say, if you after that process have happened, that you have become a human being, you have moved to a different environment, that different environment can condition what you become, despite the fact that you are a product of a people that are living in the particular situation. So what I am trying to understand here, this can be really very relevant for us as Africans in the diaspora, who maybe, for example, my mother and my father were born and they live and they died in Nigeria. But I am in Italy. I am not an Italian. I have no relationship with Italian until I came here. And I live here now. I am influenced by the situation of Italy. Despite the fact that I am in Nigeria, I come from Nigeria. That is my culture. But now I can be different because I am here. So the question is, how much influence does my new environment have in me, in being able to form whom I am today? Am I going to blame this only or partly on this environment, or only and partly on where I'm coming from? So what is the percentage of my material, my genetic material that is coming from Nigeria and my environment, which is Italy, informing who I really am today? I don't know if this question is complex.
It's complex, and I don't have a specific answer for you. I can't give you a percentage for each area. All I can say is that if you remain in Italy and you have children that remain in Italy and those children remain in Italy, you will see a shift in, what your children look like, what they behave like. their perceptions of the world and themselves in it. Like all of that is going to shift as you keep going out generation after generation after generation, because the imprinting of genetic material takes time. Like that's a definite of what I've garnered from the information that I've read. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's something that takes time. So let's say if you're born and raised in Nigeria and you spent, 25 years of your life in Nigeria, exposed to that culture, exposed to those patterns of behavior, the perceptions, the beliefs, all of that. And then you go over to Italy, and let's say you've been in Italy for 5 years. Well, not much has probably changed for you in those 5 years. However, there are other things that you can do to perhaps influence that or increase the influence. Like, so it's a matter of, well, how involved in the Italian culture are you? How much exposure do you get to the Italian culture? Because even in America, where, there's many, many, many different, people from different countries and cultural backgrounds and things like that, I have also met people like, okay, they've been in the US for 30, 40 years, but they stay in their little circle and their little circle that reminds them of home, with the same traditions, the same cultural expectations, the same, attitudes and beliefs, and they don't really venture outside of that. And so nothing really changes for them because they're not really influencing their environment. They're doing whatever they can to recreate the same environment that they left. So there are those aspects where people aren't really engaging in the new environment, the new culture, the new whatever. They're doing everything possible to keep things the same, even though they're in a different place. So I think it comes to a matter of exposure. How much exposure are you allowing yourself to have to this new environment?
That is very important point, no? That the one that you raised there. I say it's important because it has to do with actually how we then evolve the society that we live in. Because now, okay, in the book that is written by Napoleon Hill, what is the title again? Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill at the point was talking about mass psychology, in that if you live among the people and you are exposed to the culture of the people, it is impossible for you not to be influenced by these people. Which is to say, if you live in a certain culture and you are engaged in the culture, you must change. Because the mass psychology of the people will influence you. Because you are a human being, you interact with them, you eat with them, you talk with them, you joke with them. So it is impossible that you cannot pick certain characteristics from them. So that is an important point in that book, the mass psychology. The point that Napoleon Hill was making in the book. So now, this might be important for us now, as a people of African descent who might find ourselves in other part of the world, to understand that as we are continuously engaging with the people, something is going to change in us. Now, it actually made me remember something that was said to me in the course of my research, because I have been researching about the presence of Africans in northern Italy for several years now. I have written, I can just say, 7 books from the project. So one time, one of the guests I was interviewing told me that if you're an immigrant and you lived away from your country, say maybe, for example, like 3 or 5 years, you return to where you are coming from, the people there are going to think that you are crazy if you exhibit what you are bringing, because what you are bringing is new to them. And you bringing a new behavior to them, it is abnormal. So be prepared for this if you want to return home to where you are coming from. Napoleon Hill also made this reference in his book when he was talking of the Eskimo. Eskimo, I think that's how they call it. Yeah. Who came to New York, have a different experience, and he went home. By the time he returned to where he was coming from, and he started describing what he was seeing in New York, they so ridicule him. I think the guy, whether he committed suicide or he actually went and died slowly. Then another one came. When that one returned to where he came from, he basically told lies to them and they believed him. So, which is to say that the human being that we are dealing with here is not really very simple. It's a complex entity sometimes. So, even this psychological aspect of it, I think we need to talk about it because it helps us to understand ourselves even better. That led me to the SMART goal in parenting. What do you mean by that? Can you explain it maybe for people to understand?
SMART goals. So I mean SMART as in, the SMART, the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, those aspects of establishing goals. Because if you look into the business world is all about SMART goals. It's all about being able to have a goal that meets all of those conditions, that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. And so what I noticed in my research as I was, putting together information for my book is that no one, absolutely no one who has spoke on, written on, discussed, shared, whatever in regards to parenting has identified SMART goals. They mention things like you want your child to be successful, you want your child to be happy, you want your child to be, able to follow rules, or like whatever it is. But a lot of those things are abstract. They're not really specific, nor are they measurable. Because one person's idea of success doesn't automatically match another person's idea of success. And so because of that, because most people in the parenting world have not been specific in regards to, okay, what are parents trying to achieve? And then how do you measure if you're achieving this or not? Like, it's always been abstraction, abstraction, abstraction. So people get these very ambiguous results. Like, so people can read their books and they can go through these courses or do whatever it is that they do, get their coaching, and still come up with varying degrees of a result because it's all based on abstract information. And so for me, I thought that was a problem. Like, if people want to be able to achieve the same result, then there has to be a consistent process of how to do that. And so that's what I identified, the SMART goals. And there's just two goals. It's not complex. Um, but you get a little bit more complex the deeper you get into the goals. So the first SMART goal of parenting is for the parent to become their child's respected figure. And I often interchange respected figure and authority figure, because that's just how I was raised. That's, the age is reflective of the time when I was going to school, when authority figure was often used. And nowadays people are like, don't tell me authority figure. So, but I interchange both of them, but please believe that it's just becoming the respected figure. Is not about you becoming a dictator in your own home or anything of that nature. And the second goal is for children to learn how to make good choices. And then you ask, well, how do you measure a good choice? Is everybody in the involved with this choice happy with it? Like, that is the measure of the outcome. If your child is happy with the choice that they've made, you're happy that your child made a choice. Like, okay, your child is learning how to make good choices. They're learning how to choose in their behavior and how they engage with the world around them to gain the things in life that make them happy, the things in life that get them closer to their own personal goals, the things in life that help them to achieve a sense of success for themselves. So making good choices is about being able to benefit from the outcome of the choice, rather than feeling like you're at a disservice or a detriment because of the choice. So those are the two SMART goals, and they do indeed meet the specific, measurable, everything else. And so that's what I really focus on, really giving parents a lot of information as to, okay, what do you have to do to become your child's respected figure? Because you cannot deem yourself well, I'm the respected figure now. That is something that is reflected in the relationship with your child, because if your child respects you, there are certain shifts that are going to take place within that relationship versus if your child does not respect you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, when we were growing up, to our parents, we don't even have any choice whether to respect it or not. This year was just baked into us. You don't even you don't even have that kind of choice to say, okay, should I do what my parents say I should do or not? Because you must do it. Anyway, you don't know Nigerian parents. You need to know Nigerian parents. No, 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 no. They are
No,
going to.
I get where you're coming from. Trust me, I know. Like, I know. But what I'm saying is, if you want to shift this, because there is a generational dynamic within that, when parents have been told, like, you have to beat this obedience into your kids, and you have to get them to obey you at all costs. And all I'm saying is, I've abandoned that approach, because I mean, I'll be 100% honest, with my first two boys, they got a lot of spankings. Because that's what I knew. Like, that's what I grew up with. Even though my father only ever spanked me once, my mother, on the other hand, was, oh my gosh, she'd hit you for anything. So that's where I started. I started off in that place, and then being able to say, whoa, hey, wait, like, there's got to be something better. There's got to be something different. Because again, my experience with my own father was, he only ever spanked me once. Like, that was all that was ever necessary for him, for me. Like, like, we were good. But what happened was, with my mother, there was fear, versus with my father, there was respect. With my father, I would obey the things that he asked of me, because I respected him as a person, and that we had a connection and a relationship that I didn't want to sacrifice. I didn't want to damage the relationship that I had with my father, because it was important to me. So I would do things that my father asked me to do. I would do things with my father. I would do things for my father, because I had a deep respect for our relationship. And that's what I'm trying to get parents to, because the difference is, when you're afraid of your parent, you're afraid of the consequences and the beatings and the whatever else is going to come along if you don't do A, B, or C. Once that fear is removed, there's nothing left. You have no more sense of duty once the fear has been removed. And I know there are people who will still stay out of a sense of obligation. I'm a son, I'm a daughter, I have to, I must, and blah, 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 blah. And what are everybody else going to say, and things of that nature. And I get it. In other countries, you may have heavy community influence, like, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that. That's your duty. That's your duty. Unfortunately, when you come to America, you absolutely can say, nope, don't want to, somebody else do it. And that can be regarded as a positive, a negative, or whatever it may be. But, here, if you don't want to be burdened, with a parent that you have no connection to, you have no respect for, you absolutely can say, okay, I'm going to put you over there. Somebody else is going to take care of you. I'll visit you when it's convenient to me. Versus I know in other countries that may not be a possibility. And so there is more of a sense of, obligation to fulfill that role. But essentially, I don't want people to exist in the sense of duty and obligation when it comes to parent-child relationships, because I don't believe that was the intended nature of this relationship. I don't believe that God intended for parent and children to be at each other. and constantly battling, and to have this sense of animosity and obligation there. I do believe it's intended to be an extension of a loving relationship. And when you love someone, you respect them. And when you love someone, you give them freedom. And choice is freedom. It is saying, I trust you to be who you are. I trust that at the core of your being, you want what's best for you. I trust that you are going to find your way, and I'm going to be here to support you. And that's essentially what my relationship with my father was like. You know, I made choices that weren't necessarily great, but he was never there to beat me over the head, to say, I told you so, to, look down on me, to judge me. He never did any of that. He just said, okay, now what you want to do? Like, you created this situation. He wasn't going to jump in to rescue me, but he wasn't going to beat me up about being in the situation either. He was just there to be a support and to say, okay, bless you.
Thank you.
Welcome. But he was just there to, guide and to say, hey, I'm here for you, but there are certain aspects that you are responsible for in your life, and I trust you to figure it out.
Thank you for that. I like that part. That part of the choice. Now, how do you help the child to understand the choices that they are making? Okay, there is a video I see online. It was very interesting. It was the character is only just the girl, a little girl. I think many people have saw it. There is dark the room. There was a candle, an open candle that is light. The girl very curious, looking at it. He doesn't know. He tried to put hand to touch the candle, the flame that is burning. He will remove it like this. He will look at it, move around, try to touch it like this, move around. No, but like the eye that is watching the candle at the scene and look at the entire human history that is about to play out. Nobody is intervening. The guy at the point, shift around, touch the flame like this. She ran away. That is the end of the film. She have learned. That is the story. So how do we help our children to make the choice? How do we guide them? Are we supposed to observe or show them what to do or instruct them what to do, lead them to what they should do, or all of them? What would you recommend so that they can make their choice? Because when you make your choice, you are making it based on something. Help us understand that.
True. So if we're looking at the job of a parent, and you have lots of professionals and psychological theorists who have, corroborated the job of a parent is three things: to protect, provide, and guide. Like, that is your job. And we look at the guiding part, that's really what you're going to apply in terms of the choices that you present and how you present those choices. So a lot of times I really try to simplify things because I think people get things better when they're just simple. So the first choice that you're going to provide your child is, hey, you can keep doing what you're doing, whatever that behavior may be. If you yourself deem it as wrong, unacceptable, is leading them down an undesired path, whatever it is, hey, that's your first choice. Your first choice is you absolutely can keep doing what you're doing. Or two, you can choose to do this over here. And that's where you're going to guide your child towards a more appropriate choice. And if you have the opportunity to share with your child why you think this is a more appropriate choice, being able to say, hey, well, you told me this is important to you. These are things that you want to do. These are, privileges that you want to have, abilities that you want to, gain. Like, then I see this as being a preferred path for you to get that, but you choose. And that's where you come back and you allow children to choose. Now, depending on where the current state of the relationship with your child is in, your child may choose the negative thing just out of spite. just to be like, okay, now what are you going to do? Because the child is testing. The child is testing, well, what are you going to do if I don't choose the thing I know you want me to choose? It's a test for the parent to say, okay, are you now going to force me to do the thing that you want me to do? Or are you really allowing me the freedom to choose? And if I willfully choose the wrong thing, are you going to rescue me from it? Or do I have to suffer the consequences? So children who blatantly choose the wrong thing, however we're labeling that, they're doing it to test. And there are a lot of parents who fail the test. Like they present the choice and then the child doesn't choose what they want them to choose. So then they immediately want to take the choice back and they want to say, no, you're going to do this instead. Or if the child chooses it and they incur certain consequences, then they want to rescue the child from the consequences rather than standing back and saying, okay, that's what you chose. And this is what comes along with that choice. How does that feel? Is that something you want? You want to keep going down that path? Okay. And most of the children aren't dumb. They really aren't. They're very, very intelligent little beings. And they know. And if you don't rescue them from their choice and they see that they truly have the freedom to make that choice, they instinctually make better choices. They will choose something better for themselves.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Now, I am thinking that maybe there are some choices where the consequences are going to come after, which are more long lasting, where the children do not know yet. The parent know because they have been children and now they are adults. So they know both the children and the adult. Meanwhile, the children only know children. They will only be adult tomorrow. And they put the children in this situation to make a choice, which is going to build up the consequences for tomorrow. If you see a child or your child going the wrong path in this situation, what would you do? Would you let them continue in that path, or how would you walk them out of that path and put them in the right path? Okay, now this right path and wrong path sometimes can also be very trickish, in that you are saying the right path because that is what you have experimented, that is what you know, but you don't know everything yet. But at least based on what you know, this is the right path. And I'm trying to understand, what would you do in that situation? How would you walk the child away from the wrong path to the right path if you say it's a choice?
Okay. So now we kind of get into the distinction of the three jobs of the parent: the protect, provide, and guide. So if this is truly a protect issue, like protection supersedes everything else. The child has to stay alive.
First.
So if this is a matter of removing a child from a dangerous situation, then that takes precedence. Like, you have to ensure the child's safety, first of all. But everything else outside of safety, if it's just like, okay, the child isn't going to die, the child isn't going to be, permanently maimed. It's just, hey, you may just be choosing a harder path for yourself. Then that's a choice you have to let them make. And then they will find out for themselves. And you can provide them with as much information as they're willing to hear and receive. But again, it's coming back to, but that's your choice. And if that's the direction that you want to go in, okay. And maybe there'll be less support, however that looks like. Not to say that you become emotionally unavailable. I'm not saying that. But maybe if your child, just thinking of examples. So let's say your child is ready to go off to college and you're saying, hey, if you go to these colleges over here, they're closer. I can help you out a little bit more. I can probably, give you more money to help, foot the bill. But if you go to these ones over here that maybe they're far away and they're more expensive, I'm more limited in the support I can provide for you. But if you know this, I've provided you with enough information for you to make an informed decision. and you're still choosing this other option, knowing you're going to receive less support and you're okay with that, okay, then it is what it is. And I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that I can't do as much because my child made this decision. My child made that decision. They don't want as much if they made that decision.
All right. Thank you for that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm asking you all this question because there are parents that are listening. They don't have the chance to be able to ask you. So I'm asking for everybody, both the intelligent and non-intelligent, and those who know what to ask and those who do not know what to ask. So that's why I'm asking all the questions.
That's fine.
All right. Now let's look at another situation within this choice. You told the child that he or she can make the choice, then they will be allowed to live by the decision. Maybe they have not got into the years yet where they are choosing whether to study mass communication or being a lawyer or being an accountant. They are still small. Therefore, maybe they are studying, they are going to school, of course, they are at home. They have to make a choice. They choose that instead of study, they want to watch TV or things like that. But that doesn't put them at an immediate danger because watching TV, now instead of study, they are not going to die. Nothing is going to happen. What do you do there as a parent?
Okay, that's a good question. So for me, I set up certain rules in my house to kind of limit the possibilities of where the situation can go. So for me, rule number one is there are no TVs, no screens on in my house until homework is done. And if you choose not to do your homework, then you're also choosing not to watch TV, not to play your games, not to be on your phone. That's part of your choice. It's like you can't have the best of both worlds. It comes down to that. It's called opportunity cost. It's an economic concept that in order to have A, you're also choosing not to have B.
And so,
yes. So I set my house up to kind of cut a lot of those types of issues off before they even become problems. It's not that you get to come home and you get to engage in whatever, and then later it's the battle of, okay, now you have to shut all this stuff off to get your homework done or whatever. But at the same time, I'm not a helicopter pilot. I'm sorry, I'm not a helicopter parent. So I'm not on, the internet checking, oh my gosh, you don't have this assignment done. And this is where a lot of trust exists between myself and my sons, where, I ask, hey, you have homework today? And my boys are honest. And most of the time they say, yeah, I have to do this. But on occasion, somebody's like, ooh, I forgot. I didn't, turn in this assignment, or now it's late, or it's time to go to bed. And it's like, but Mom, I got this thing I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, sucks to be you, doesn't it? Because there's still rules in my house. Bedtime is still at a certain time. And if it's 5 minutes before bedtime and you're telling me you have an assignment that you haven't done, you are going to go to school the next day having to suffer that consequence, unless you want to wake yourself up earlier, because I'm not going to wake up earlier. I'm not going to torture myself and suffer your consequence. So if you want to wake yourself up earlier and get that homework done before you have to go to school, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. But are you going to stay up later right now because you didn't do what you're supposed to do earlier? No. My rules don't change, and I'm not going to inconvenience myself because of your choices.
That's interesting. I love that. Thank you for that. Now,
you're welcome.
Now you are looking at parents. You are looking at the choices that they make. You're looking at those that you are also teaching. Based on your understanding, also practical experiences, because you're a parent of 5 children. Okay, what makes good parenting? Explain.
Okay, so what makes for good parenting? Everything that I teach in my course. One, you understand that your job as a parent is to protect, provide, and guide. So everything that you're doing should be falling under one of those three categories. Now, that's your starting point. How you protect, provide, and guide becomes the determining factor of what type of relationship you're going to have with your child. Now, I have indeed met parents who are like, look, we don't have to be friends. I just need to get you from birth to 18 and you can go out and have your own life. And I really don't care what happens after that. I've met those people. There are people out there who are just like, okay, I helped populate the world. That's it. My job is done.
That's funny. That would be funny, really.
So I understand. I'm not trying to turn people into something that they don't want to be. Like, if that's the type of parent you want to be, then my course really isn't for you. You're not going to find it applicable because you're not going to want to do most of the things that are in there. So if that is your job, you're willing to protect, provide, and guide, leave it at that. You've done the bare minimum. That's it. You're done. Okay, I accept that. But I'm looking at what makes for a good parent is reflective of, one, what kind of parent the parent wants to be, and two, what does that parent-child relationship look like? So if you're a type of parent who doesn't just want to populate the world and you want to build a healthy, loving, long-lasting connection with your child, then along with protecting, providing, and guiding, then you have to be your child's respected figure. And to be that respected figure, there are 5 skills that you have to learn how to master. 1, you have to be consistent. Consistency is the top of the list for any parent, because what I tell people is you can even be a bad parent, however you want to label what makes for a bad parent. But if you are consistently that bad parent, you're still doing less damage than an inconsistent parent, because consistency does so much for the development of a child. And consistency allows for predictability, and predictability allows for mastery, and mastery leads into self-confidence within a child and their feeling of self-worth, that they can indeed influence the world around them. So consistency is building a lot. Along with that, it is also minimizing anxiety. When people are in an unpredictable environment, anxiety is through the roof, because the job of anxiety is to prepare you for the unknown. So if you're constantly living in unknown, there is nothing that you can say for sure is going to happen or not happen, then your anxiety is through the roof. And being in a constant state of anxiety is not productive, because it's actually hindering certain pieces of development within people, because you're too preoccupied with surviving every single moment of the day. So consistency is the number 1 skill to be your child's respected figure. The next one is nurturing. And nurturing is the ability to identify and then meet your child's needs. So each child has their own personality, their own characteristics, their own wants, needs, and everything else. So as a parent, it is your job to be able to decipher, like, when this child does this, this is what that child needs, versus if this child over here does a similar thing, that child may not need the same thing that the first one did. The second one may need something different. So nurturing is your ability to identify and then to meet your child's needs appropriately. The third thing is the guidance and how you guide. And then I go through, how do you consistently present these choices? How do you consistently follow through with rewards and consequences to shape appropriate behavior? So guiding is very important in how you do it. The fourth thing is listening. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Your child is a whole being, and you don't know how your child is perceiving the world around them. And you, as the parent, are not your child's only influence. So the only way you are going to get to know what else is influencing your child, and how is that shaping your child's attitudes and beliefs around the world, about the world, and then influencing their behavior of how they're interacting at home with you and other siblings and neighbors and things of that nature. You got to listen. You have to be open to hearing what information they're taking in and how they are like placing this information in their worldview and how they see themselves. You got to listen. And then the last thing is speaking. So you want to listen to gain understanding, but you want to speak to build trust. So here's where you are going to prove how trustworthy you are. Are you a person of your word? Can your child rely on the fact that if you said no, that no is still no? That it's not, okay, 20 minutes later, the no is turned to yes. Like if you said you're going to bake cookies, do you follow through and bake cookies? Or is that, okay, well, there's a chance it may happen. There's a chance it may not happen. I really don't know. I don't know if I can trust this person. So your word, and not just your word, but how you speak to your child is also going to convey what level of respect do you have for your child. Because if you are speaking to your child in a way that shows them that you don't respect them, then children are going to think, well, why should I respect you? Like, this is a two-way street. So if you aren't going to earn any respect, then why should I owe it to you?
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
That is a lot of value packed into that response. Yeah, there's a lot of value there. I appreciate you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Now, tell me, what is the central message of your book? I think that is important. We are moving towards the end of the conversation.
Right. So the message of the book is everything that I just said. It's in regards to helping parents to understand what their job as a parent is, and then the importance of how they do that job. And it's how they do their job as a parent that is going to result in not just the quality of the person that they are raising, but the quality of the relationship they will have with that person. And if you want to have a healthier and easier parenting experience in general, then you're going to want to do these things that I share with people in my book, because I tell people all the time, and I don't think they really believe me. I think people have been so programmed to, expect certain types of dynamics in parent-child relationships that when I say certain things, I don't think they believe me. But my oldest son is 30. My youngest son just turned 14. Out of all these years and experiences of parenting 5 boys, I have never once had a power struggle. And I've never had a power struggle with them because I have always parented this way. And if you as a parent never again want to have an argument with your child, you never want your child to storm off and slamming doors and yelling and cursing, not once have any of my sons ever yelled at me. I mean, one time, my second son, when he was small, he was probably like 5 or 6 years old. He said, "I hate you." And I was like, okay. And he never said it again. I'm sure he was just testing what would happen if he said it. But I haven't had any of the horror stories that so many parents seem to share, and they've accepted as a normal thing within parenting. And I just want you to know that's not normal, and you don't have to accept it, and you don't have to have it.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that.
You're
Now,
welcome.
tell people, how can they find your book? And how can they find also other services that you offer? Use these few seconds to advertise what you are doing. Yeah.
Okay, so you can find my book. It's called The Parenting Treatment Plan. It's available on Amazon. It's also available through Barnes and Nobles, their Nook. So they're kind of like their digital books. And then you can go to my website, which is www.helenvhicks, Hicks, counseling.com. parentingcoachhelen.com. And then you'll see a list of my services that are available there, which includes my parenting course and any parent coaching that you would like.
Thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate the time and the valuable lesson that you delivered today. We appreciate you. We really do.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
All right. So, what would be your final thought here? How do you conclude the conversation? Your final message that people can take home with?
I guess my final message is simply, what you were talking about before with your story and your narrative. Here is your now. If you're listening to this, then this is your now. And regardless of what your before has been, I want to challenge all of you to change your after. If your now isn't where you want to be, it's not where you consistently want to be, then I'm absolutely here to help you in terms of your parenting journey to help shift your after to something that is more acceptable.
Thank you so much, Helen. You are incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.